The manhunt of escaped convict Danelo Cavalcante has focused in the immediate area to the north, east, and west of Longwood Gardens.
And she got really sick after, like, they realized it was Danilo at the house, you know? It was Danilo at the house, you know?
What's going on, Cam? How are you guys? I'm here back in Pocopson with an individual who was in the center of the manhunt that riveted the nation. We're back here in Kennett Square, not Pocopson, sorry guys. I want to introduce you to Cam. Cam?
Hey guys.
Cool, so Cam worked the manhunt. Now give us a little bit of, I guess, what did you do? Give us a little background on that.
Yeah, so, I mean, the state police had a really difficult task at hand. They came to us and basically asked, hey, look, we're going to need every person, every single officer that we have on this perimeter. We need civilians, we need people who can actually help and assist. I had a past with thermal imaging, so we were actually in charge of all the thermal imaging for the drone team that actually was scaling and making sure that the location where Danelo was basically being proactively kept was accurate, and then seeing if we could catch heat maps. So yeah.
So how many people are in that, and do they have a list of people they call? Is it a small list? Like you said, you're in thermal imaging. Is it an industry that's not so involved with other?
Yeah, so how I got into it was I actually did it for fires for a local 911 center. And they basically, you know, I don't know if you know anything about thermal imaging and fires. So when a fire is ignited in a building and they're trying to figure out if there's souls inside, the fire is so much hotter than the people's body temperature inside. So they'll actually show us a cold temperature on our thermal imaging center. And we were able to identify that there were beings inside or that there were not beings inside. And so I would say there's not many people that have an eye for it. Realistically, that's what it is. It's people who can identify and pick things out as you're scaling, going 20, 30, 45 miles an hour above a certain location, and be able to find certain very small thermal pieces that could identify as what we're looking for.
So let's go back to August 31st. Danelo Cavalcante, a convicted murderer, escapes from the Chester County prison and leads authorities and you guys on a 14-day manhunt in zigzags, but nevertheless a manhunt. Obviously, that was probably one of the biggest, I would say, one of the bigger manhunts that you've worked. Walk us through it. So that morning, did you get a phone call? Did you get an email? Walk us through your first day hearing about Danelo Cavalcante and the steps you took, the calls you made. How you ensemble a team? What do you do when you get that call?
Yeah, so we kind of got a team. Well, we had a team ready to go, as in all these things that we ever encounter. They're a mixture between people who are in the authorities, out of the authorities, civilians like myself, and just like people who are very good at what they do. And when it's time to go, it's time to go. We have to drop everything and be at a certain location. Because sometimes it does equate to life or death. For us, this situation was different. We got a phone call. We got a few phone calls, actually, from a few different people from the local 911 center. This bug is giving me a hard time right now. From the local 911 center and said, hey, look, they're looking for somebody to kind of take this over. They're prospecting that they think they are going to need every single person they have on the perimeter, and anybody be interested in it? And we kind of just started talking, having conversations from that point. We got connected at the top, we got connected to the command center, and then moved over to a basically ready to go. We had to drop everything and be there as soon as possible. And it's really good because I live in Philadelphia myself, so it was local for us. And then the team kind of came in one day, the next day another person came in, and they were coming from New Jersey, New York, places like that.
So when you get the call, they did they say it's a convicted murderer, or did they just give you minimal details until you get there to be briefed?
No, they're supposed to give us minimal details.
Okay.
Because at that point, leaks are so prominent nowadays. Yeah. If somebody called me and said, "Hey, look, there's a killer on the loose," I'm gonna probably say something to somebody else, and I think it was good for them to quarantine us before they told us, "Hey, this is what's going on. This is the situation," and then before they sent us into the perimeter as well. To kind of preface what we were going to be coming in contact with, so there was no mass panic from the start, because I feel like, essentially there would be an issue if somebody, if you get a call and like, "Hey, there's a murderer on the loose, I need you here," I'd be like, "All right, let me say goodbye to my parents, let me do all this stuff." So it was,
So it's interesting, your team, you said you guys go from fires and whatnot. Are they, you get there, did they tell you, like, "Yo, man, I didn't sign up for a convicted killer"? Was there ever a time when your team was hesitant, scared? Are they used to chasing guys like this through terrain like this?
So I knew it was an escaped prisoner. Yeah. We just didn't know details from that point. So to kind of answer that first part of that question, no, we didn't really know what we were against, but I think a lot of the guys on the team kind of identified, hey, like, it is what it is. We're just going to do our job, and we're going to find this guy, and we're going to rely on the authorities that are here, the non-civilians, to keep us safe. And then, what was the second part of the question?
The second part was, I'm not 100% sure, so we're going to get back to it. So let's cut down to the first week. The public, there wasn't much from the government at press conferences, which is kind of normal when you don't have much to go off of. Now, being in the manhunt, if you were DA, does it make, that there weren't many updates, or were there updates? Were there enough updates to be giving a daily update for hours on end, or not hours, but a full update, or were there days where there was just no activity whatsoever?
So in the first few weeks, there was a lot of information that was being disseminated. One of the big things that they didn't want to do was cause mass panic. And they did a very good job at not causing mass panic, because a lot of the information that was spread was, falsified, or it ended up being something that was false. But they did a really good job at squashing a lot of that information. There was a lot of intel being exchanged in the first couple of days that realistically, as any type of authority, it's not smart to share that information right off the bat until it's deemed to be safe, or and then realistically, like the convict himself, is he watching, or is he kind of keeping an eye on the manhunt himself? And we didn't want to disseminate too much information as to what we knew.
Now, on a personal note, I guess, now that you got into that, were you ever on one of these dark roads by yourself? And I'm sure you were, because we were. And you got that little chill, or you heard branches crackling, and you're like, okay, this guy might be walking by me. Now, you're dealing with a guy who has nothing to lose, who would see you, and obviously you're tied with law enforcement on the manhunt, and your threat to him greater than others. Was there a period that even maybe you felt uneasy, anything like that?
Constantly. I was looking over my shoulder. I know everybody else on the team was. They were just kind of like, what was that? What was that? Like trying to keep an eye. There was not a point where I didn't feel safe. I think the only part that made me a little uneasy was when he was able to get a hold of a firearm, because the only reason why someone would have a firearm is for force, and I don't think his intentions were to harm people. I think his intentions were to get the heck out of Dodge.
So you come to Chester County on, was it day one, day two, around the first week? Was it? It was the first week, right? Mm-hmm. The first command center was at Chester County Prison, and then it went to Carco, and then Poe Marlin. Mm-hmm. So when you guys get to town, do you go to the perimeter? Do you go to the command center? Do you go to the state police barracks?
Yeah, so we did a walkthrough. and then we got briefed basically by our vehicle and by some of their vehicles as well. There was a lot of confusion behind who was who, right? The feds came into town, the state police came into town, local police were there, marshals were there, there was so many different authorities there that I think a lot of people didn't really understand how much of a scale it was from the start. And they were like, oh, well, the FBI is not here. No, the FBI was here pretty early on.
I think everybody was here except almost everybody. We saw the Blackhawks. We saw at one point the National Guard, FBI, ATF, I think. In Glenmore, they were there. It ramped up big time when they went over to Glenmore. But what was it, 750 boots on the ground for the first, around an estimate, I think, after day 5 it started.
I would say max we got to 750, maybe more. And that was just, police officers in itself. So not counting the feds that came into town. This was a heavy usage of force, and for good reason, right? The community felt unsafe. They felt like there's a killer in the woods, and what are we supposed to do, right?
Yeah, no, it was scary, and now looking back, it's not comical, but it's something that we can look back and kind of almost laugh about because of how, I call him 𝗬𝗑𝗓𝗑 now. He was able to literally leap around. And I guess speaking of leaping, talk to us about some weird things that maybe you saw behind the scenes of 𝗬𝗑𝗓 leaping around.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'll kind of go into the difficulties behind what we do. It's very interesting the way that we're able to identify certain heat maps off of just basically scanning the woods. And to be honest with you, when we first started the search itself, we were looking for a needle in a haystack. With the different terrains, with the different open areas, with the different closed areas, the waterways, all this stuff caused a huge issue for us from the start. Meaning, and also the heat outside, the heat during the day. It was warm. When everything around you is at about 95, 98 degrees, something similar to that, it's really hard to see a thermal map of a person, right? Yeah. Especially from the distance we are away. So it was just blind scanning, and this blind scanning for us could only occur, we tried it during the day, but it could only occur at night. That was how we were most effective. So essentially what it was just path, similar to the way that the FBI planes were making search passes as well. But it was just very interesting. He was very strategic about how he moved, and he understood a lot of our tactics and the way that we have to search at a certain time, and we have to look for this, and we have to identify certain times. At certain times, officers will sleep, they won't do searches, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's widely known.
He caught on probably a couple days in, and he would just lay low. Yeah. I mean, there was a few instances where we did see what we believed to be a thermal imaging of him, but he was just moving. He would make very sudden movements. He was very strategically make pushes to get into a new location. And the problem with this terrain is that you look around. I mean, the tree line is so thick. Yeah. It's tree after tree after tree, and the tree line is so tall as well. So it's not like it'd be super easy as if I was looking for somebody in a cornfield. In a cornfield, it's a little bit easier.
No, really? I think it's easier in the cornfield.
So much easier. I can see straight down a corn stalk itself. Interesting. The only problem is when corn gets too thick, it starts to lay on top of each other, and the leaves get so thick. But treetops are not something you can see through. And especially when it's multiple trees all stacked up on each other, and then you have low-lying brush down here, sometimes too thick for our officers or us to even walk through. And it really took some really strategic movements for them to make progress through this thick brush. Because honestly, at this point, it would have been more effective to take a weed whacker to it.
Yeah, and I think they were starting hard. So I guess the difficulties that you mentioned that you can in the daytime look and use your equipment, is it worth flying in the day? Because I know you guys would have to charge batteries and stuff. How long would it take to get another full charge? how many batteries does it take to power those things?
Yeah, so I don't want to talk too much about our equipment.
Makes sense.
But for us to charge to a full charge and be able to actually administer a good flight path, we keep on hand about 70 batteries in total. So once they're consistently all charged, I could probably stay up for 20 to 30 days.
So essentially it doesn't, if you go up in the day, it's not going to harm you at night. You're still able to
For
operate.
us, it's a matter of going to our warehouse and grabbing a new battery and re-administering. Obviously, the drone needs to be brought down. It needs to be kept out of public sight as well, because that was a big issue from the start.
And how do you, I'm not asking how you did that, but I mean, you look around. I was here for the entire man. I did not see any of your drones. I thought you guys were kidding because people were saying they're huge, but I don't see it. And if I couldn't see it, Danelo couldn't see it. When you look around, where would you take something like that to land it and hide it from? Let's say we are in, like, I don't know, Pocopson or something, where it's upstate and Farmville. There are trees here, so I guess when it gets low enough, they'll see it. But, I mean, you almost have a secret operation of yourself because you can't let the drone be seen that you're using to capture.
We would find a really small opening because these drones, they're so precise and they have so much power behind them. Again, don't want to get too much into the drones themselves, but we can find, basically, I could land this drone with a half-inch clearance on both sides because of how precise they are in a tree line, which would essentially hide the fact or the location of where it is. They're not that loud. That was one of the biggest things, is they're not that loud, and we can bring it down pretty effectively within 5 to 7 minutes, get another battery, and get back up in the air.
So what were some of the, I guess, difficulties other than terrain and your work as the drone, what would I call you? Operator. What were difficulties, aside from the drone, coming to the perimeter, getting situated? Was it a tough time for you to call and find out where to go, or did you have, like, points of contact as somebody, or was it 30 people you have to call?
See, that was one of the big things from the start, right? Who do we go to? Who do we report to? Who's the top guy? Who am I supposed to disseminate information to? It was really difficult from the start, and it turned into basically a few people at a time that we weren't supposed to really know names. We weren't really supposed to know more than what information I'm sending back and forth, which I think they did a great job of. They very much held on to a lot of information that we gave them. But that was one of the really hard things with having so many different authorities coming into town, and too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes, to where it's, some people think they have authority, some people think they have jurisdiction, others think they have jurisdiction. When in reality, it was the state police that had all authorizing jurisdiction.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess let's go back to the first week. I believe, I don't know, before he left Glenmore, I guess let's talk about a little bit of what they mentioned at the state police conferences. It was the terrain issue out here that was a major problem. They spoke of difficulties at Longwood, not about anything other than the terrain. At the press conferences, they were mentioning the brush. And you go to French Creek, and it's the same thing. So when you heard he was, not French Creek, I'm sorry, Glenmore. When you heard he was at Glenmore, did your stomach drop because you thought of terrain? I'm assuming you thought of the terrain differences. And in Glenmore, it's a vast terrain. Were you more worried when you went toward that area, or were you more relieved that he got in a car and made a move that you guys now know he is in this region for sure, and let's lock him in somewhere?
I mean, who would be relieved knowing that a convicted killer got into a car, it completely surrounded in a perimeter, and drove?
Well, you guys have
45
a
minutes.
Now you guys didn't see him for like 5 days, So it's good that he made that little move. And I think, honestly, if he didn't steal the car, he had a better chance just laying low. I think stealing the car was reckless. It was very reckless. He went through Easy Pass. He got seen on all of the ring camera. He went to his friend's house. It was those little mistakes that make everything else just go to waste. Whether you can climb trees and swing on branches, if you're going to use a Ring doorbell, it makes everything else.
Or an Easy Pass.
Yeah, or an Easy Pass.
Yeah.
So I think if anything, maybe it helped. If maybe I'm wrong, did it help?
So I think the area that we were in initially was a lot easier for us to make searches of, because the tree lines, the locations where there was a lot of brush were limited, right? We had open areas that if he was going to make movements, he would have to make movements across in order to get from one location to another. But I think one of the initial things was how many people were actually coming in and making calls and saying, we think we hear him in our back. All these different 911 calls that are coming in that the police are then having to disseminate, and then all of a sudden one comes in and they're like, oh, he's actually at our front door, and it's almost an hour away. I mean, I think to get through all that information is so incredibly crazy, and then to have that be true and us have to move at that point, all of us were like, whoa, what just happened? Like we kind of got knocked on our butt, but then it was, all right, let's get to the next location.
And it was almost like it snowballed out of control from there, and then you guys stopped it right in time, because shortly after the Glenmore, he gets another sighting, he gets a gun, gets into a little shootout with a resident, and darts into brush again after making his little rounds and burglaries. What, I guess, the differences between Glenmore and Pocopson? What are the pros, what are the cons as law enforcement in general, not just like aerial, like the manhunt in general? Would it be easier in a city? Would it be easier in a cornfield?
Realistically, it's easier where there's less people. When there's more people, and I don't say that to the residents at all, because the residents were one of the many reasons why, or one of the few reasons why we ended up being able to find him, because we were able to pinpoint off of certain 911 calls, off of certain footage, off certain trail cam, things like that, where exactly and what exactly his movements were. There was a pretty good idea of what his actual path of travel was, because we had all this information that was being sent to us. Yeah, you have to kind of identify which information's not realistic, or go do a report on, we heard this person in our back shed. Okay, could not be, but there's no proof behind it, so then we kind of move on to the next one. And that's super important too. The residents were one of the main reasons why he was actually caught, and we appreciate them for that.
Yeah, the residents are amazing. I keep saying the property value here should go up because of the community coming together. There was an escape killer on the loose, but at the end of the day, the community bonded like something I've never seen before. And ultimately, they all assisted, they all jumped in, they all started watching streams, commenting, calling, emailing, going to press conferences, getting involved. And that's something that I personally never saw that at a news story before. And working manhunts, I'm not sure if you've seen something like that before.
I mean, yeah, but the other manhunts that we've worked were not really in the realm of this one. They're more or less like a missing person, or they're person on the run, but they didn't have the quite level of threat that this one did to the community. And I think that fear was almost what incited all the community to come together. Because everyone's fearful, but okay, we're all fearful, let's be fearful together, and let's start to disseminate information to each other to bring this guy to justice.
Yeah. Was there a moment during the manhunt where you thought maybe this guy could possibly slightly, just by a small chance, get away? Was there a second, a minute that you thought that?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
Absolutely not. There was every way, which way you looked, there was a different police department, a different federal agency, a different... constantly. Just driving past constantly, lights on full blast. Like, there was no rhyme or reason as to, in my mind, that he would ever get out of the perimeter itself. And sometimes, things don't always go your way. I do remember when I entered the perimeter a few times, how effectively they looked through our vehicles. This was not your average sweep. This was open this, open that, open your trunk, open all these things, because they truly believe he would make an escape that way, or attempt to make an escape that way.
So they were trying everything. I saw them searching trains at the behind the Ace Hardware, I guess leaving no stone unturned.
Which is understandable, right?
Yeah.
Because if you were going to get out of a location, train is a really great way to do it. Car's a really great way to do it. But how do you figure that out? I mean, honestly, he probably just laid low, and he probably could have laid low for a little bit longer, but some of the mistakes he made really led to the capture.
And nobody got hurt.
And nobody got hurt, thank the Lord.
So you have an escaped murderer running through these trees and terrorizing, essentially, the community, making headlines around the world. When did it kick in that, okay, this thing's being watched by people in every corner of the world? For me, I didn't realize it until the 13th or 14th or 15th. I don't think I've watched my own streams yet. But I did not understand the impact that this manhunt had essentially on the world. Everybody was watching. Were you expecting, I mean, there's always press coverage, and I mean, that's normal. But international world news, it's a little bit unheard of for an escapee. You being in the manhunt, when did you start seeing those headlines hit like the BBC or Sky News, the international?
I think probably around day 3, day 4, when they realized that this was not just he got out, let's just grab him and handcuff him again. And they realized, like, this is going to be a lot longer than we expect. That's when I started to see the headlines. The local headlines started pretty early after it started. We kind of got a good idea. Oh, he's escaped, and then the helicopters started, and that's kind of really what I think started the turn of that. Once the story got out, it spread like a wildfire. I had people calling me constantly, hey, did you hear about this? It's happening in your backyard, and I wasn't able to say anything at the time. So,
So that's interesting. So, like, you work in a field where you aren't law enforcement per se, but you are contracted by them for a rather big deal. This is one of the biggest things in Pennsylvania. When people call you, obviously you can't talk about it, and I guess many don't even know that you would be in it. Did anybody of your friend group know that you're working, or is it something that you guys have to keep, like, national security top secret?
Until the last day, that's when I was able to actually start talking about it. Just because there can be issues, there can be things. I've learned that when things like this come about, you shut your mouth. You don't talk about it.
Yeah, that's the smartest thing to do.
You don't talk about it because you kind of run into bigger issues. People are, oh, can I have this update? Like, I wasn't able to be on my phone for 14, 15 hours a day, let alone I run another business completely. But, it becomes difficult because I didn't want anybody to know. Maybe my parents, and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
My parents and my family.
You have to make sure you're safe, too. So you come to Pennsylvania. So you were in Philadelphia, right? Or you live in Philly?
Yeah.
So how, I guess on a scale of 1 to 10 with difficulty on the Cavalcante, I don't know how to phrase this. The guy was Tarzan. The guy was amazing. When did you learn how he was able to climb trees or do all this athletic stuff? Was it when did you guys find out about how he escaped from the prison essentially the same time the world found out, or is that something that they tell you guys early on? Yeah,
so when we get these types of manhunts, we're basically slapped with a file. And they say, look, this is what he's done so far, this is the sighting, this is everything. And so I took a day, maybe 13 hours, looking into whatever that file had to say. And pretty early on figured out that this guy's Spider-Man. And was able to scale a wall, that takes immense core strength to even realistically do 2 or 3 steps, let alone a whole wall itself.
Did that change your operation at all?
No. Absolutely not, no. What we were doing was we were scanning for any heat signature. So if he was in a tree, I'd still see him, as long as he wasn't covered by brush or covered by anything like that. Which is actually, there was a minor thing that we made adjustments to. Usually we'll only do overhead scans, which is basically camera is facing straight down. We're just scanning. It's the most effective way for us to see something. And to identify the movement of an animal or whatever it may be, we started to do angle shots a little bit. So we would angle the camera at 45 degrees. That way, if we did have an opening, we could kind of see into the opening itself. Making adjustments like that to kind of make sure that we're not missing things when we're scanning over top. Maybe he's under a bush or something like that, but I can see his foot or whatever it may be. So you guys were kind of like, I guess, zeroed in on a specific little, I think it's like a schoolhouse road. It's around conservatory. It's that little region for
5 days. What makes it hard? I mean, how big was that region? Because I don't know firsthand, you know. So was it a larger region that I'm thinking of? What made it hard, essentially, other than, obviously, the brush and the fact that he was able to run, was there anything else that just added an extra layer of, like, WTF is going on with this guy? He's able to now do this. Like, were you ever shocked when you learned another trait of his?
He was kind of like, honestly, like everybody else. Realistically, I don't think he made any movements the only thing that he did very well in that first zone that we were searching was he did his best to try and not be spotted at all. From what we understood and from our intel, we could understand that he was traveling by waterways, which is a really effective way to travel. And the water temperature at that time was, I think it was about 65 to 75 degrees on average. So I could see his heat map if he was in the water itself. The only thing that we noticed was the bridges, the fact that he had some sort of blanket or coverage at some point where he could actually throw it over top of himself and completely hit his heat map. But other than that, I think his traits, all in all, he knows how to live off the land, or he knew how to live off the land. People like that, where they think they, 100% know where they're trying to go, what they're trying to do. He didn't have a plan, and he very much didn't have a plan, but he got away with some things, and the mistakes were really what led to the ultimate capture.
So, and that's the interesting thing. I guess everybody slips up after a while, because he went over a week.
I mean, realistically, if you broke out of prison, do you have a plan?
No, I wouldn't know where. I wouldn't. I don't think I can make it a block away. I don't walk.
Can I tell you right now? I'd walk right back to the front door.
Exactly. I take that, and it's a beautiful place on the outside. There's a walking path, so I'd probably try that. But I'm not running. I'm not going anywhere. So I'd be a terrible example. But I wouldn't come back if I made it.
Just walk back like this.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the adrenaline that you get, none of us know, but I mean, we're not murderers. The adrenaline was through the roof. And he was able to outrun more letters of the alphabet than you had every single agency here. It looked like a war zone. We had the same sort of military-style helicopters that go to war on the homeland, looking for a foreigner who escaped a jail in a very quiet county when you look at the grand scale of things.
So the cool thing about Black Hawk helicopters, and everyone seems to talk about that, is that they have a very high-tech thermal imaging system in them. But that thermal imaging system is meant for the guns, basically the gunslinger, which is, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen a Black Hawk helicopter shoot at anything.
No.
It will melt something. It's basically something crazy like 1,000 rounds per second or something like that, where whatever's in front of it is going to melt. And but the effectiveness of the thermal imaging portion of that aircraft itself is one of the highest tech pieces of equipment we have.
And that's what's scary, knowing that this guy warranted Black Hawks to come to town. I mean, have you heard of that? Do they do that for manhunts generally? Is that like a first for you?
I think it is a first for me because he was a convicted murderer.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason why. He had a prior conviction in a different country and then a conviction here, and possibly facing deportation, or now that he committed murder in the U.S., be kept here for good and possibly be put on something further than that. But yeah, no, I think the only reason why was because of the severity of what his conviction was.
That makes sense. So what's something, I guess, when you think of the manhunt looking back, is there a memory that just hits you right off the top of your head? What's something that you'll never forget, or one or two things, or three or four? There's a lot with...
Yeah, so two things. So the first time we got in one of the Fed's cars, and they were rushing us from location to location, it was the first time I had ever kept the aircraft in the air and took the controller with me. And so it was very concerning because realistically, these things have heavy-duty geo-targeting or fencing portions of their location. So we have to get there fast enough that the drone doesn't run out of battery and try to land back at the original location so I can reset the new location, and we're driving in the perimeter. And having to find a new location it's kind of like creating like this heartbeat in my chest, and trying to figure out where exactly that. But riding from location to location, and listening to what was coming in on frequencies, and all the reports of sightings and things like that, and we'd only go to a certain severity of sighting, but we'd rush there. We'd be doing 110 miles an hour on back roads, which was crazy to me. And then the second thing was the first time he had gotten a hold of a firearm, driving into the perimeter by myself in the pitch black, driving past the police checkpoints that they would check the vehicles. But then at that point,
yeah, there was not many checks. It was a very interesting night with the gun, because Hong and I somehow wound up on Prizer Road. And first, we were stuck in traffic where apparently he had jumped out of a car, or not jumped out of a car, he had ran through the field, and he lost his boot, and the officer gave chase through the field. We're sitting there, we run up, can't get a good angle, we see flashlights left and right, we hear wood crackling to the right. I'm calling friends and saying, hey, just so you know, I think there's here's my location, just in case there was some crackling wood. It was very laid back, yet it was not. It was almost like a facade, because it seemed laid back. We were in the heart of the perimeter. We were at, I believe, the home that got burglarized, if I'm not mistaken, the next night. And when we were leaving, it was they had a lot of questions as to how we were parked there. And once we explained it, obviously they let us go. But before we went, they started running towards Prizer Road, which I believe is when there was a sighting of Danelo on Prizer, I think crossing over toward, he came from, there was like a triangle perimeter you guys had set up. It was like a Dairy Road, Coventryville Road, and like in the Prizer Road section. So as soon as we leave, they go running. When did you just go from Longwood straight to Glenmore? Did you go,
So it was interesting, right? We basically were utilized when they needed us. If there was a sighting, which was consistent, but if there was a time when they hadn't made a sighting in a certain time and they were just holding perimeter, we were kind of pulled off. The FBI was doing what they were doing with the overhead plane, the thermal imaging plane. So I was actually out of state at that point, and actually had to make the drive up here pretty quickly to get here in time. But it was good because it was actually closer to where I was, which, times is a blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah, and speaking of Glenmore, now something came to my mind when there were a lot of rumors on the night of the gun, and it was like rumor central on social media. Everybody was saying he's in a black SUV, he's in the trunk of a car, he's been spotted getting in with a gun.
And that part was concerning for myself and you, because we both had black SUVs at the time.
Exactly, and that's just, how do you chase a call like that? A black SUV? Did you chase the call? Like, what do you got? Not chase.
I don't know if we did. Like I said, there's a lot of information that was disseminated, and it was misinterpreted, and we heard this and that, and we saw this and we saw that, and I'm sure you got a lot of that as well from the stream. But it just became super interesting that, like, the team got really good. The state police team, the team back at the HQ did a very, very good job of disseminating what was real, what was fake.
Yeah.
But realistically, like, it was a mix between, the feds and the police going out and clearing out all these calls, which took a lot of manpower, realistically. Which made it a little bit more difficult, but also made it a little bit easier for the officers at the same time, because, I would say 80% of the calls were not real, but the 20% that were had fully armed officers ready to go, and they fielded the call, they got the information, and they got back as quickly as possible to go to the next one. So, yeah.
So once you leave, like, I guess what your last day was, walk us through the night before the capture. He was in, I guess, walk us through the Glenmore Prizer Road area. He made a run toward Lundale, I believe, and then
to the farm.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting area too, because it's very thick, and there's a waterway there. So it was really difficult for us to get any type of imaging there. It was really difficult because, I mean, he knew he wanted to stay off the farm as much as possible, and what we had to rely on was the trail cams that were up in that area. And so the movement there was really strategic because it was along a tree line, a really thick tree line, to where I really couldn't get much of anything. We actually had gotten pulled off the call for a few hours there, so I was able to rest my eyes at least for a couple hours there. And then things started to pick up the next day.
So,
and they did not. There was no stutter or anything. They picked up at the same pace we left off that day before.
So it was a very fluid. I use that word a lot during the stream, and people started getting, I guess, clingy to it. So it was a fluid scene out there. You were there, what, 2 days, or was it 3? Glenmore was 3 days, or 2 days and
3 days.
3 days, 2 nights.
Yeah.
The last night leading up to the capture, it was pouring rain for Hong and I. We were trying to get as close to Littles as we could. It turns out we were very close, and we tried to get closer, and then 3 hours later we wound up at the same spot. When we were out there, we didn't see any police lights. We saw a few roadblocks. I didn't see any trooper until we finally stationed up, and then it was just one guy. But from what a lot of people are telling me, that it was flooded with blue all over, up and down Prizer Road, Coventryville Road, kind of in a perimeter with no lights.
Yeah, so intel was super important during that time because by that point, there was a really good idea of where he was. And there was no questions about it. What they didn't want to do was scare him too much to where he would try and make an escape or do something like that. And sometimes that's the best thing for police to do on a perimeter, is just to lay off a little bit, hold off, turn off your lights, just don't make it look like you're there. And then that kind of leads into the move in and the hard push that came along with it. And yeah,
because I remember when they lit the place up, then you can see it like it was daytime, and that's what's crazy.
Oh my gosh, it was like a stadium out there.
And they're able to hold such a low profile, and then when they say light it up, it literally lit up, which I believe is a cool tactic, because I thought the perimeter had either shifted or they made it a soft perimeter, but no, they were invisible, but they were there. And I kept telling locals that these guys are out there. They just don't want to be seen. They don't want to be heard. And that's how they catch these people.
It's so crazy to me because the Border Patrol the BORTAC officers, when they came in, they were invisible to us. If he had a thermal imaging headset on, if Danelo had a thermal imaging headset on, he wouldn't have seen anybody. Huh. But they were there.
Oh, I know they were there. They were definitely there. They walked out with him.
They were completely invisible to us, which was a completely different thing than what we. I think there's certain things that, and I've actually done more research on this since that happened. There's certain things that the Border Patrol have access to because I think of a larger budgets, such as thermal condensing material. Which is made by a company called 𝗦𝗑𝗏𝗏𝗏. Shout out 𝗦𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. It's a great company. Where they're making this fabric that they actually can put over vehicles. And I don't know if you know this about in Afghanistan and Iraq, places like that. You can see the heat of an engine because the engine gets hot, the actual hood gets hot, everything around the vehicle itself gets hot. The brakes get hot, the exhaust gets hot. You can see it's a vehicle pretty clearly through thermal imaging. They're making this fabric now that you can cover right over top the car itself or the truck or vehicle itself, where it condenses the thermal heat mapping for us. So it creates this invisibility cloak, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And it's like some of that next-gen cutting-edge technology that I had to look into because I had never seen it before. Came back to me, they're like, what the hell? Like, we can't even see
You try to add it to the budget. You got to tell your guys. We need
right? I don't need it. I want you to know that I'm there,
Exactly. How many manhunts have you been to where 𝗣𝗘𝗥𝗘𝗔𝗬 has arrived, or was this your first with
0.
Okay.
0.
And I guess this is your first for a few things, the convicted killer, the 𝗣𝗘𝗥𝗘𝗔𝗬. And I think this might be a last for Chester County. I highly doubt another convicted killer is going to make his way out of those gates because of, I mean, I've never heard of one before in the U.S. For my age, I haven't covered one. Chester County hasn't had one, I can tell you that. With the way the community bonded together and the way law enforcement stormed the region, I think it set a good example of what to expect if you are to try to escape from Chester County. Most people aren't Danelo Cavalcante. They aren't as athletic. There was another escape a month before or 2 months before where the guy made it a couple of hours. What do you think made all the difference for Danelo to kind of get that skyrocket of 13? That was a long manhunt when you have that much manpower. I know generally it's not, if it could take weeks or a month, but we had the entire United States government here. What gave him like the edge?
I think his living off the land was a big part of what actually led to everything that he was able to do. He knew how to blend into his surroundings. He knew how to make it look like there was nobody here. He made it really look as effective as possible. I mean, he made escaping from that prison look like it was something he's done, you know, once a week for his entire life. And so it's just like now there's minor things where, you know, okay, maybe there was a small issue in the actual in the prison itself, but now, you know, how do we respond to that, right? Here, I mean, the community has been so helpful in getting this manhunt and bringing him to justice. But how do we respond to that? Do we bring consultants into the prisons? Do we bring things in like that? Yeah, this guy might have had some superhuman strength, and he might have known how to live off the land. But if there was no section at the top of that prison where he was actually able to get out of, we would have never run into the issue.
I think the issue begins at violent offenders who are convicted of murder should not be in a county jail. I don't care if they have the right to an appeal. They should be transferred to a state prison where they are, we are safe, and I guess they are safe too because there's professional staff.
Sometimes there's mix-ups in the prison system, though. Sometimes there's small issues, accounting, you know, whatever it may be. But nobody's expecting something like this to happen, right?
No.
But since Al Capone days.
Exactly, and that was the vibe when it happened. A lot of my friends in law enforcement were kind of in shock. At first, they were very confident, like, well, we're going to catch this dude tomorrow. All right, we'll get him Wednesday. We're getting close. It was a roller coaster of emotions. It was excitement, and then it was, I'm not going to say sadness, but more so let down. I feel by day 7 or 8, the hype stopped. Every time there was a sighting, I can tell you, even with the sisters' home, when they called it in, I didn't really have any adrenaline rush at that point because there were so many sightings, and this one was an hour away, so it really didn't click. Did you start losing adrenaline? Did you ever have adrenaline when it came to sightings?
No. I think at the beginning it was, the most adrenaline for me came within the perimeter itself, and, you know, obviously anything can happen. Anything could happen. And I think that's the most important thing, is the community also knew that anything could happen. Anything could go down. I'm just really glad that everyone's safe through this whole process and everything.
So looking back now, I guess 9 months later, and seeing the amount of coverage it's had and the impact, and I'm sure there's going to be, I mean, I think there is a book. Somebody wrote a book, or 2 books, some local reporter. You know, we're working on a docu-series. Did you ever think that when you got to Chester County, this tiny little beautiful community, that this is going to be the biggest manhunt I have ever worked, possibly in your life? I mean, I know you're a young guy, but when are you going to have another Danelo Cavalcante breakout?
Yeah, I mean, to me it's just like another day, right? All I was doing was just making sure this guy was caught at one point or another. I was an assistant to everyone else's job here. I was a tool to what they were trying to achieve, and it's not going to come with me. My drone's not going to come down and make the arrest. The officers on the ground are going to make the arrest.
Well, speaking of that, why can't you take... Let's get off topic. Why can't you take the drone and whack him? Now, if you see the guy and you land it, he has a price on his head. There's a reward. You know, they want him dead or alive. They kind of said it. You can't take it. You can't land the drone on a guy.
No. No, my insurance company would not like that.
Well, I'm sure the community would love it. That's crazy. I just wanted to ask because I was always curious. Because if I had the drone, I would likely drop it on the guy. And
I think if you saw this thing, it's not as maneuverable as you might think. So I don't know if I could chase him. I couldn't chase him through some terrain like this. All he had to do was get behind a tree, and it would be game over for that drone. So, yeah, there's a couple reasons why. I mean, realistically, like, we're getting to a point where drones are able to have things installed on them, like firearms and things like that. But it's just we're so far away from it right now, and it's like whose fault is it if something happens, right? It just becomes a bigger issue at that point.
Yeah, that makes...
Then I'll definitely need a ton of attorneys to help me get out of that one.
Don't we all? Shout out to Joseph Lesniak. He's one of the best attorneys. If you ever get in trouble, I'm giving him a plug. He's our corporate lawyer who's helping us with some of our Danelo work. And speaking of Danelo work, it's just fascinating that we're back here 9 months later. I was here every day, not here, but in town, and I saw you maybe once or twice by passing. Never stuck out as you stuck out almost as a CIA agent because I've never seen a beefed up car like that. But I never thought, hey, this guy is a drone guy, or he's in with the feds, or he's in with the state police. You kept a low profile, and you were, I believe, outside of the perimeter. Is that when you get to the scene? So I guess you don't have to stay in the perimeter. You can kind of roam around until
we get put on standby.
Okay.
So if they need us, they need us. If they don't, unfortunately, we just kind of stake out. But that's the point of coming into places like this. We can't stick out. If we stick out too much, we get questioned, we get pressed, we get all this stuff. And it's just something that we want to avoid as much as possible. And, you know, obviously people make the assumption, yeah, that's CIA, that's FBI, whatever it may be. It doesn't matter. As much as I can blend in, I'm going to blend in. You're not going to ask questions. And that's kind of what really matters.
So how, in the weather, are these things able to operate, these drones, in a thunderstorm? Because on the night Cavalcante was captured, I want to say it was a thunderstorm. It was downpouring.
Yeah.
And I saw the ATF, I believe, had thermal imaging of Danelo. You can operate those things in all weather conditions?
Yeah, so we can operate through a certain level of rain. Thunderstorms, not necessarily, they don't matter too much. Obviously, you know, you have a chance of getting electrocuted, but most of these things are made of carbon fiber. So the internal materials are not, you know, they're not as effective as we might think, but also, like, what does it cost to close this thing out, right? And that's where a strategic decision has to be made. The ATF and the FBI pulled their plane out of the air, and we kind of made a strategic decision to kind of keep eyes on, and paid off big time.
So when you say you guys are on standby, that means are you paid to be there on standby, or okay?
Yeah.
So no matter what, whether you go up or down, you're just...
Yeah, essentially.
And was there a day or a night that you didn't go up, or were you up every single night that you were there?
We would go up at least once a day, at least. The only one where we probably didn't go up at all during the day was the time that I was actually out of state.
Okay. And I guess roughly, off the top of your head, did you guys have more than 10 sightings of the guy in Pocopson, Kennett Township region? Are you able to talk about?
I'll kind of wait till everything's kind of closed out to have that conversation.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
There's a handful.
Okay. And shifting an operation like at this magnitude from this region over to Glenmore, 45 minutes out. Is it a process for you, or is it as easy as throwing the drones in the back of a car or truck and heading?
No, it's a process for us. Everything has to be folded up. Again, don't want to get too much into the build because
I talk about like hour-wise or a
so
frame.
Fold up. I don't want to give too much away as far as like strategy goes, but fold up and movement for us takes about 9 to 12 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a lot different than
if we're quick, which means like you account for travel time and then you account for fold up, pack up, everything like that, which is on average I would say 10 to 12 minutes, or 9 to 12 minutes, and then re-administer, which is about 8 to 9 minutes, which is pretty effective.
And when you're on scene, I'm not sure if you report to somebody, but are you, like, I guess, trained not to communicate with the public, not to communicate with reporters? If somebody comes up to you, because you're a quiet dude, or you're trained to be a quiet guy.
Yeah, I mean, like what I said earlier, right? When you get into the situation, you shut up. You shut up real quick until there's something that has to be disseminated, or, to be honest with you, it wasn't my story to tell. It was whatever information that the state police and the feds wanted to disseminate was up to them. It wouldn't be my story to tell. There was definitely leaks throughout the manhunt itself, and things would get out, but most of the time I think the community disseminated that information as, oh, this is just one person saying it or two people saying it, right? We can't believe it to be a fact. And so we had to be super careful about that, because it could have turned into a much bigger issue. And then also, strategy-wise, like, we didn't want to understand at some point that the fugitive was watching what we were talking about. We wanted him to watch press conferences and for him to know that we only know so much information, or only telling you so much information, because that's the strategy behind a lot of this. You don't want to disseminate everything to the public. That's how you cause way bigger issues.
Yeah, no, definitely. And when it comes to no-fly zones and stuff like that, I think I heard that they try to put one into effect a couple of times, and I'm assuming it's because of your car-sized drones. Do you have the authority to call, like, who is it, you that calls the state police and says, hey, I need to have my drone at this level and we need airspace because there's a news helicopter coming overhead?
Yeah, so the news helicopters, when they were filming news, had nothing to do with us. They were only allowed to be within a certain radius of the perimeter. When the news stations made a decision that they were going to actually assist with the manhunt, because obviously anything aerial-wise is going to help, that's when they were allowed in the perimeter itself. We never ran into any issues with them. We basically told them what altitude we'd be flying at, and that was kind of it.
Now, how about airliners? Are you high? Like, do they have to divert? Okay.
I can't talk too much about that.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the corn fields, because there's a lot of rumors, and I'd like to either verify or debunk.
Well, when you guys were walking
no,
out
not
in the
us in the
cornfield?
So we were in the cornfield, and there were a few sightings.
Oh, no, there was sightings of you guys. And
Is that what that was?
And then that got called in to...
Let's go on to any other cornfield sightings. Were there any, or no? I guess there were a few. From what I understood...
Not from us.
Not from you.
Not from us.
Because I was hearing that the state police would see... I mean, there were a few chases on Springhouse, I believe it is, but it was all state police.
The problem with what we were doing is we're searching an area, the ground officers are searching an area, and then they'd see something, and by the time we try and get over there, he was intelligent enough to get to the tree line. So I was deemed ineffective, and then it was officer on man, and as you can imagine, with this type of brush, you could get lost pretty quickly.
And yeah, that's what we kept reiterating during the stream, is you can't really... I can lay down. I laid down in the corn and it kind of worked. But now you tell me that wouldn't have worked with your thermal imaging. But the terrain is just so difficult. And if you're not from here,
that corn, I could see through. I do remember that vividly. I could see, because there were little animals and rodents and stuff like that. Because we'll pick up everything, basically even down to a mouse. It just looks like a little dot. But you can tell, due to the nature and the way that the animal's moving, what it is. And I'll show you guys a little bit of that here in a little bit.
Cool.
But no, I could definitely see to the ground there. It wouldn't have affected too much. I would have seen at least a leg, an arm, or something like that. There were no sightings from our end.
And when you have Glenmore, was it less? Was it more this? Was it more brush, more tree, less sorghum, less?
I think it was thicker than this.
Thicker than this.
Yeah.
And Littles, I guess, behind Littles, that infamous now wood pile. Back there, would you have been able to see them over the? I think it's a creek. Beaver Creek goes across.
I can't see. That's why I was talking about that really thick tree line. We completely. It's a complete darkness there.
So how about the, was it the ATF or DEA that released a Super Mario, like, pixelated video of something moving?
So you'll know, like, that's basically what they see. And it's up to them to disseminate, and obviously they get a higher quality version of it, okay. But it's up to them to disseminate who it is. And then they'll release a very low quality footage, because what you can imagine is you can see very clearly facial features on these much larger planes, even though it was significantly higher than anything as far as helicopters go. You can see a lot of detail, and so that's why they released these very pixelated versions, just as proof of, hey, look, this is him. And then it's, then they're not giving away too much information, which is good for the community too. What was the prior question?
So we had, there was a problem with streamers coming to town, and when Hong and I started covering the escape, we never used YouTube or like X Live or any of that. It was my first time going live, and a lot of streamers came to town. Some were great, and others, many never heard of. And privacy became a big problem here in Chester County. Working the Manhunt, was privacy and security being leaked a concern from the state police? Was it a greater concern now that they have, what do they call them, super sleuths, I guess, snooping around town? Did it make your job any more difficult?
I mean, are you asking if you guys made my job more difficult?
Yes, essentially, because...
I mean, you're from around this area, but you did come into town in order to...
Because at the press conferences, they kept saying that the streamers are interfering, and it was very interesting because we can't really interfere by walking through.
So I will say this, for us, the less people in an area that I'm searching, the better. Mm-hmm. I can identify a heat map off of anything. Could be a dog, could be a cat, could be a rat, could be
That's a perimeter,
bunny.
Right?
In the perimeter,
yeah. In the perimeter.
And so what happens is the drone operator's eyes, or my eyes, would shift to this heat map immediately. Because you're like, okay, let me investigate. The problem is there were people that were pushing and pushing and pushing the boundaries for the state police, for the feds, for everybody that was actually effectively trying to search. And it caused a bigger issue because it, as much as I say it was a waste of our resources, it really was. We'd have people walking into, maybe not even streamers, just civilians and citizens walking into the perimeter itself, and then we're having to go over and surveillance them for a bit. And I think that we probably wasted a lot of resources on that, and having streamers around the perimeter also could be wasting a lot of resources as well. And I'm not saying it's the worst thing in the world. I think it's good that the community knows what's going on, and somebody's at least keeping them up to date on a minute to minute basis. But it also caused a little bit more of a dagger for us.
Especially, and in an area like this, privacy it's more than currency. It's more than, trust. They want their privacy. And that's how law enforcement is too, even though you have a right to film them. It's just, there's a level of respect and privacy. And then there's also the level of do not cross the boundary and enter a forest or a cornfield and with guns. Because at one point we were live and people showed up, rifles or something, and had a beer into the woods.
Yeah, I will say that is a very easy way to get shot at by police officers that are actually serving their duties and not knowing, hey, they're coming in. I will say that specific occurrence, was that over by the Kennett area?
Springhouse, somewhere out there.
So that is specific one we did hear over the radio. So we had a kind of a heads up on that because all the officers had pulled out for the night, as far as we were understanding, and they were just holding the perimeter. And so that was not as big of a deal. It did become a bigger deal later down the road.
I guess this is an opinion question, but 10 days or 9 days or 8 days into a manhunt, locals were, I guess, fed up, and they felt that there wasn't much information flowing, that maybe there wasn't enough manpower, and a lot of them were calling and going out. So I don't blame them for wanting to know more, and I don't blame them for, I guess if you have a backyard that's like this and it's large, or if you have a backyard in a cornfield, that's fine, but you're not supposed to be traveling to a crime scene, well, it's not a crime scene, but the perimeter, and going in to search for somebody. And that became an issue, I think on days, not just one day, it was like 4 days straight. It became like a little pattern, and that kind of died down when we got to Glenmore because of how fast it literally went from 0 to 100. We get to Glenmore, they find the van. First they find the van. We get to Glenmore, no perimeter for a few hours. They set a perimeter up the road, and it was perimeter after perimeter, and these perimeters you couldn't get through compared to the other ones. We were able to drive easily through other ones because there were no roadblocks, and next thing you know, we're in the perimeter. But in Glenmore, there was no getting in. Why was it, if you know, why did they ramp up the level of security over at Glenmore?
There's a much bigger thing to what kind of that question is. I think that's a little bit of a loaded question, because the perimeter as it existed was very heavy from the start. And are you talking about the first perimeter, the first couple of perimeters that they set, or the last?
The last one. The last.
So there was a lot of intel being spread, and we had a really good idea of where he was, what he was doing. You would be surprised at how much information we had on what he was doing, where he was. And when I say we had, like the feds and the police themselves had more information than we did. They were extremely confident going into those last few perimeters that they were going to capture him. They didn't know what the time frame was. They didn't know where they were going to capture him, but they knew they were going to capture him. And it was extremely well executed, because I don't know if you noticed, but they stopped disseminating information all in all.
No, I
as
noticed.
We got closer to the end of things. When we were at the beginning of things, I think it was a little bit of an unknown as to what the motive was. And so the community and the citizens that are in this community were trying to figure out, is he going to come and kill us? Is he going to do this? Is he going to do that? As we got closer to the end of the manhunt itself, we had a better understanding.
No, is it a bug? Okay.
Ooh, that bit me. We had a better understanding of what his motive was. And his motive was just to get away. He wasn't going to break in. He wasn't going to kill you and your family. His motive was, let me just get the heck out of here.
And I think the state police did a great job when it comes to the overall coordination of something like this. You can't really prep for this. I mean, I don't know any colonel of state police that has ever had to call 750 troopers. You know, that's a military. I give them great props for the way they handled it and the way they brought in so much manpower. But does there come a point where it becomes too much manpower? Did there or no?
Not at all.
No?
Not at all. They effectively brought in, I would say, like 12 NFL teams.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
They brought in enough people to basically have a full perimeter and then a full intel team, and they brought in as many people as they needed. And yeah, they had some of these officers had to relocate, pick up, and like just go into this terrain they were very unsure of, or didn't have any understanding or pre-existing knowledge of. But they did a really good job, and they did it super effectively. it was challenging. It was not easy at all. And I think a lot of the criticism around the police itself is just a lack of understanding of what it actually was, like what the feed ahead was. They did a really, really great job, and they created, what was to be a safe community once again within less than 2 weeks.
No, definitely. So I believe we have a video that we're going to show, and we're going to narrate. So we're going to
go get this bug bite checked out.
Yeah, so why don't we get ready for the video that Cam's going to play. We're going to come over and go from, let me know. I'm going to walk over.
Yeah.
So I'll do a battery change real quick. Just let me know when you want me to hit play.
Yeah, you can go ahead. So what you'll see here is actually just what a scan looks like above where we were. This one was actually outside the perimeter. Thick terrain, obviously what you can see as being ground is going to be cooler than the trees above. You can see how little ground we can actually see from this point. And you might be able to understand how frustrating this gets looking at the same imaging over and over and over again. But this is what a basic scan looks like for us and what we were doing for hours and hours and hours at a time. And then up here in a few minutes, we'll kind of just give you a good idea of what a thermal imaging portion looks like. So you can see at the top of the screen there, that's actually one of the locations and one of the tents we were under. That was one of the members of our team. And then look through the trees here. You can see how cold the ground is compared to the trees above. It's just, you see 90% treetops and 10% ground, maybe even less than that. It becomes a much bigger issue and deemed to be a huge issue for us long term. And you can see we're actually zooming in here. There is a little bunny on the ground. That is not a little bunny. That is a big bunny. But we identified what it was based off the movements itself. Very small little hops and turned into, to be honest with you, that could be a bunny, that could be a raccoon, that could be a number of things. But you see how difficult it is for us to disseminate that information from a height this high up. But we can change zoom locations and different diameters of the actual camera itself for identifying what it actually is. Just to mention, in this footage here, there is no spotting or anything that would lead to dissemination of information on the case. You can cut that video.
So that was an exclusive video that was just shown to us by Cam, and it was pretty epic, and that's what they were seeing from above. And you guys can see how difficult.
Yeah, it gives you a good idea and a good... Can you hear me, by the way?
Not yet.
Okay.
Sorry guys, we're just getting
capybaras here. But you know, it's really interesting because it's hard to identify what things are. Now, people, completely different. We can basically see there's a whole portion to people that you can't see on an animal itself, and we have separate heat imaging maps that we can switch over to, which are custom for us, and it basically we lock in on the subject itself, we zoom in, and then we change to a color map or a color gradient. And the color gradient basically says, okay, the outside is this hot, the inside is this hot, the inside is this hot, and then the inside is this hot. It looks like the core of the Earth, right? Okay, the outside is a little bit cooler, the inside's a little bit warmer, a little bit warmer, a little bit warmer, and then you get to the epicenter of the Earth, and that's the hottest portion of things. So that, for a human, is the heart.
Okay. Wow. Learning something here. What made you get into this field? Because it's a very unique field, thermal imaging drones, and then you have another business I guess we'll talk about as well, just to get a background on what you do and who you are.
Yeah, so I when I started, I wanted to study cybersecurity and counterterrorism, and so I always wanted to be, you know, involved in authorities at some point, and honestly, life just led me down a little bit of a different path. I ended up playing soccer professionally, and so that kind of shifted my attention away from ever pursuing any of this stuff. So it was a way for me to get my hands a little dirty on the side of assisting the men and women that protect us every day, rather than being one of them, which you know, I respect every single one of them. They put their lives on the line. They were the ones that were standing out there at all hours of the night to make sure this community was safe, and they keep us safe every day of the week.
No, I mean, the men and women that were out here day and night, and some of them were getting, I mean, they were working 18-hour shifts, some of them. A lot of them are coming from across the state. They were pulling they left no stone unturned when it came to manpower. Every agency under the sun was here. Maybe coordination was a problem, but that is a problem, right? When you have that many agencies. Is that something that you noticed as far as how do you coordinate with 50, 60 different?
Think about it this way. They had a day's notice to put together a team, bring every single agency in, somehow get them all on the same page, set up a command center, and then 5 days later move everything and shift everything to a completely different geographic location. It's not a small feat whatsoever. It's really, really difficult to get a lot of these agencies on the same channel and get them all on the same page, especially when there's disputes among, you know, who's in charge here, who's in charge of what, who's in charge of this, who's in charge of that, who's doing thermal, who's doing, you know, sky surveillance, stuff like that. It becomes super, super difficult, and I think they did a really great job at effectively making sure things were planted by the time they really needed it, and then at that point, like, picking up everything and just moving, you know, 20-30 miles away and resetting up there and honestly starting over, right?
Yeah, literally. They find the van, and before they found the van, there was, I want to say, a 8 or so hour gap, maybe a little less, from when the van was confirmed to be from Bailey's farm and it was found. That's a rather large gap, and for that gap, there was no perimeter at all. I think it was Coatesville. They arrived at the church. They set up a small, I'm not going to call it a perimeter, they surrounded the church, and then they went their separate ways until they can have another lead, that being the infamous white van that they found by the church. The van, so that day, that's the day I believe that you said you were out of state and then you came back. So
when the migration of everything happened, there was a decent amount of time where we didn't really have much of anything coming through, and I think that was on purpose. I think there was a lot more information being disseminated than we knew about, but it was within the authorities themselves. When they say that, I don't mind myself on anything that they have on the internal side, but when they say they need us, they need us. We pick up and we go. I don't care if you're disseminating that information or if you're holding that back or whatever it may be. And I also understand that there's leaks wherever you go, right? In every agency, in every law enforcement, everywhere. There's somebody that's going to say something that's going to eventually get out. So I understand why they were so secretive, and then why they didn't really give updates for a certain amount of time. Because to be honest with you, I don't think they ever gave the impression that they were on his butt, but they were on his butt.
Yeah, no, it does appear. They were always very close, and there's no disputing that. They were within smelling reach of the guy. And he just...
Well, I compared the movement of the van and all this stuff to similar to the Brian Kohberger situation, where he had left Idaho and moved, but the police had an eye on him. They knew exactly where he was, all the cameras itself. The state of Pennsylvania has a great infrastructure when it comes to that, when it comes to identifying certain license plates that come through. The Easy Pass system is fantastic for finding cars and finding people and things like that. You wouldn't believe the surveillance system that they've installed and they've invested in, because it's literally saved lives. And that's why you don't hear many instances in Pennsylvania about like silver alerts, or what's the other one with kids?
Amber
alerts, or anything like that, because they're pretty effectively understanding, like, if this car is in Pennsylvania and they are driving on a Pennsylvania state road, we're going to have some indication of where that car is, the direction of travel, and then they'll be able to administer and put state police or whoever out on their butt. We don't see Amber Alerts very often.
No.
And they're pretty quickly solved, and we don't see silver alerts very often, because, and you know what silver alerts are, right? The older generation, because they're solved so quickly. So that I will say for Pennsylvania, they're very much on top of.
Yeah,
when it comes to these situations, I mean, having technology like that and investing in technology like that is fantastic. Yeah.
Is there anything that they could have brought that they maybe left out? I can't think of much of anything.
I think they brought every resource they had. And to be honest with you, I don't know if bringing more resources or more tools would have made that much of a difference for them.
And then you have 𝗤𝗏 Command Center. I'm not sure if you went by there, but it looked like
Fun fact, I never went to the 𝗤𝗏.
Oh, I went a few times, and that place was like a Walmart. I mean, well, I guess an expensive Walmart. It looked like a showroom. There were gadgets everywhere. You can take a picture of this, go look at this.
We'll call it Target.
Here we go, Target. It was almost like a showroom of equipment, great equipment. I'm sure it would have been great out in the field. Is there a reason that they kind of leave it there? You didn't go to 𝗤𝗏,
so few things. So manpower, somebody's got to always be there utilizing it and using the equipment to its, and it's got to be a specialist. So you can't just have some random guy utilizing the equipment. I don't know if you knew what any of the equipment was capable of. I have no idea. I know my lane. I know my drones. I know what they do, how they're effective, how they're most effective. The other equipment that the authorities use, I'm leaving that to specialists and people who actually devote their lives to doing that, like similar to the way that certain officers devote their lives to canines.
Yeah. We saw DJI, these little drones, the little white ones up at the perimeter. Those aren't with you guys, right? That was...
No, so the local police and the state police, I believe, invested in these a few years ago.
It's always good.
Where all the perimeter officers, well, not all the perimeter officers, all the officers within the state police and within the local police have these DJI drones. They're literally just surveillance drones. They go up. You can see from a high level. There's not really much you can do. There's no thermal imaging. There's no zoom. There's none of this stuff. And I think it's just another tool. I think a lot of the officers, and we kind of saw this pretty early on, a lot of the officers were getting bored on the perimeter because there wasn't much action. Really what they were relying on was holding the perimeter and then pushing the tactical units into where he would be pressed. And then maybe he would pop out, and maybe he would do that. I think they knew they were just there to hold and do surveillance and make sure, civilians stay out and things like that. So, it was kind of funny to see that those drones out there and up in the air. Obviously, didn't have any effect on us, but
when you were working when they made the capture, right, that morning. When it came through the radio, is that when you heard? Did you hear a second earlier? And what was the feeling like? I mean, you guys just caught the guy that outran you and essentially made headlines worldwide, and it's over.
Yeah, so we saw it. I saw it. I saw it happen live. And it turned into, national news pretty quick. I would say we were down to the minute of it occurring.
And how was the energy in the room when they confirmed that it is Danelo?
Oh, I have no idea.
Oh, you weren't?
No, I was...
Sleep.
I wanted to... Can you hear me now? Mic check, 1, 2.
Mic check, 1, 2.
Better? Good to go?
Perfect. Right. So I'm going to pull up. As I said earlier, guys, if you're watching this, it's great if you migrate over to X. That's where we are going to be grabbing a lot of questions that we can answer on X. So it's x.com/NickTheHat. And if you comment on the stream, I should be seeing them momentarily. And we're going to grab questions that we can take. Now, keep in mind, it's an ongoing case. So there's no questions about trial. There's no questions about tactics. It's more so general questions, and I'm now seeing them come in. So let us...
Make sure our general counsel
he's
able to see all these.
I might need another phone. Can you bring me mine? But yeah, no, I definitely want to grab questions from... There's a good amount of people that want to know more, and they just can't until it's over. And it's not over, right? He has to either plead guilty or be convicted before it comes to an end. So I believe it's still an ongoing case as far as you're concerned, right? You don't...
Yeah. No, we can't speak on much of anything. Obviously, I can speak on what's public.
Let's grab...
And then things that are not imminent to the case.
Questions.
Or pertinent to the case. Sponsored by Celsius.
Yeah, right? Hey, interesting.
Shout out to John.
Problems looking at any comments? Can you see on the... Sorry, guys, I'm trying to get to the comments, and I am not grabbing them on here. X, you are great.
It's so interesting seeing, some of these woods from the ground, or some of these houses from the ground.
Yeah, because you haven't, right?
No, I've only seen roofs. I've only seen, and we go over certain passes, and identifying, oh, that's a big house. That's a big house. I wonder who lives there, right? And then being able to see it from the ground is even better. But I've spoken to some civilians and some citizens in this area, and they're like, we've seen the helicopters, we've seen the planes and all that stuff, and I'm like, well, I've seen your house from above, but it's even more beautiful from the ground, right?
Yeah,
it's funny
because you were mainly you'd be parked in one area, and that was it, and it was nighttime, right, for the most part. So you didn't get to see the beautiful properties that are around, except from above, which you couldn't really see much. We're going to be taking comments from Facebook until they fix the X situation, and YouTube as well. So if you're on YouTube, if you guys go ahead and comment on what kind of questions you have, we are looking at them now. And honestly, we're going to just keep talking until the comments come on. Okay. So, when you get a Danelo, I'm not saying it's a trophy thing. It's not like something to be bragging about. I guess generally you're chasing a killer. Well, it's good. You're helping catch a killer. What do you... you're not law enforcement, but you want to help the community, and you did. You guys provided eyes in the sky, and I believe you guys kept eyes on him for, not continuously, but 10 days on and off, or 13 days on and off. You are in a sector where you're not going to be killed going to work, but you're able to be a first responder in a way as a contractor.
I did feel like there was opportunities where I could get myself into situations like that, but we had to be very stealthy about where we were operating from, and kind of stay away from like high traffic areas, high volume areas. No, I 100% think that there were opportunities where we definitely could have been in a lot of immense danger.
Here are our questions.
But I'm really happy that nothing ever happened, and really thankful for the law enforcement officers that were there to ensure our safety.
Well, that one is a no-go. A lot of investigative questions. So, we're not able to talk about in the investigation, guys. Generally, when you come out to an area like this, me in the media, it's not an area that generally you're welcome to. I've been to Brooklyn, Iowa to cover a missing girl who wound up dead. It was a horrifying story. Counties like this, towns like this, they love their privacy. Were you ever approached by a neighbor, like asking, are you with the police? Are you with the news? Who are you?
Yeah, a few times. I've told a few people a few different things.
And are you allowed to talk to?
No, I can't. Like I said, I'll reiterate again. When you get into a situation like this, you shut up real quick, because you're being fed a lot of information, and there's a lot of contractual obligations that you have to hold information and make sure it doesn't go anywhere. But you and your team are able to utilize that information. I've told people that I was the catering department for the police department. I've told them a few things, but I don't think I've ever really told anyone directly what we were doing there until after.
And even then, there's not much you can say except you were working. It's a job, and that's your job. People aren't going to call their friend they will call their friends that are cops, and they'll say, well, we can't talk about it. And this is one of the few industries that you really can't talk about it. And how do you do that? I'm sure you have a girlfriend, you have family, your parents, and this is close to home. You have a wild manhunt, the highest profile one, and you're able to separate work from personal rather easily.
I mean, it's like fractionally, right? What I am here for a very specific thing, and this is not my main thing. Like, this is not what I do full time. But we have to be so careful about what we say, because we can run into a lot of issues there. Obviously, separating work and everything like that, like between me, my family, my girlfriend, it would always be like, "Hey, are you okay? Hey, just got here," and they knew what I was doing. There was no information shared more than that. They knew where I was. They had my location, and that was kind of it.
I'm looking at the YouTube comments right now, guys, because that's the only ones I'm seeing. Oh. And do you guys want to grab X questions?
I'm texting it to you.
Yeah, take it from there. Cool. Let's grab... I see people saying good question, but I don't see the question. If you're on YouTube, please start commenting. I'm checking there right now. There are no fundraisers. I don't know what people are talking about, guys.
It's so funny being back here and having my back to the woods. I keep like...
You feel safe now? Yeah, I know. That's why you keep looking back.
Yeah.
No, it's not Danelo.
It was one of the big things. Like, we were always, when we were next to the road,
There's only one.
with a tent, like we would be under a tent, but we would never have our back to the woods, ever, because, you know, it's kind of it. We just kind of put our back to the woods, or I'm sorry, put our back to the road, or put our side to the road, and then kind of be looking over our shoulder. Yeah, no, there was many times where we were hearing things and things like that. So
A lot of the questions are about the investigation. That's why I'm just looking at the phone and waiting for questions that are not part of the investigation, guys. We can't talk about that. Essentially, we talked about his arrival to Pocopson and then his little journey around the region without touching base on the investigation. On the outside looking in, I mean, we were here, so it's different for Hong and I, because we saw the hard work that was going into this. But if you're trying to tell somebody from New York or from California why it took so long to catch Danelo Cavalcante, or the police illiterate, do they not know what they're doing, what would you tell them, and how would you explain it, being the guy that was in the sky and able to see?
I've been on manhunts where the police were completely clueless, incompetent. Like, I've been in those situations, and this was not one of those situations. This is one of the situations where terrain, where timing all came into play, and really caused the bigger issue. The terrain was one of the biggest issues that we dealt with. The fact that I couldn't really see much of anything from the sky, the fact that, I mean, officers are having to dredge over literal bushes that are 6.5 feet tall to get through and be able to go walk a straight line through the woods is insane. It's plausible how quickly they actually set everything up, how they brought all these people into play and really created a game plan within a few days to get him captured. It was definitely a mixture between the terrain, like I mentioned, and then also, you know, his ability to live off the land and maneuverability and his understanding and his mindset was really one of the biggest things.
So somebody here, how do you train to be a drone operator?
So honestly,
And let me just add that is from Marilyn Ferriello on YouTube, just so you guys know.
So training for something like this, it's not something that you can train for. I flew drones my entire life, ever since there was a drone that first was created and DJI came out with their first one. I was always maneuvering it, I was always flying it, trying to figure out where it would go. And then before that, like before DJI was a thing, I had drones that were like off-brand, and I would try and maneuver those and see how those things would work. When it got really serious, I got asked, because I had the correct credentialing for it, I got asked to do some bigger projects and some bigger jobs And they started us slow at the 911 center, and then it turned into something much, much, much bigger, and got very, very, very good at it. And I think realistically, like with doing this over and over and over again, you can't train for something like this. This is just how much experience do you have, how long have you done it for, how many times do you do it, sometimes they'll go out and we'll search for, deer that are in the backyard. I'll put the drone up and we'll be able to see thermal imaging of deer. And, it might be an ineffective way of hunting, but it's kind of cool, right?
Yeah, right? Do you ever see anything with the drones that they can't explain? This is from Lisa Marie on YouTube. Have you ever seen something you couldn't tell quite what it was?
From this specific manhunt?
Ever. Manhunts or work, any sort of work, law enforcement related searches, I guess.
Yeah, I've definitely seen something that I couldn't explain what it was. It was kind of just a ball of heat.
Ball of heat. That's
It was
interesting.
just a ball of heat, and it was like what we thought it was, and what we identified or thought to think it was living moss.
Huh.
And it's only a thing in, I think, in Florida, but this living moss basically operates at the same temperature as we do. I don't know if that's 100% true, but that was one thing that I was like, I don't know what that is. It could be like a Sasquatch lying down, or something
right?
like that.
Let's go to Michelle Color. What learning experience did you take away from this you did not know before?
Yeah, I mean, don't underestimate anyone or anything. I think we, from the start, underestimated an escaped fugitive, and he definitely took advantage of that. He took advantage of us underestimating him, and it caused a big problem for us. And once we kind of went into this and reevaluated our strategy behind it, and decided, okay, this is like hunting Tarzan or Spider-Man or something like that. That's when we started to look in unconventional places and started to get more of this imaging we were looking for.
What was your reaction when he was caught? This is from Tina Gillo on YouTube.
We kind of chatted about this before. I just really wanted to go home, sleep, eat. I was super happy, super excited for the officers involved. Super excited that all these officers that are on the perimeter get to go home to their families finally. But really just like a sense of relief after meeting with some of these community members and things like that. Just a sense of relief for them and identifying that, look, this guy's no longer in your woods.
What's the closest that, now this is something if you can answer, if you can't, that's fine. What's the closest that you got to catching him before you ultimately caught him? That's from 𝗦𝗧𝗥𝗘𝗔𝗕 on YouTube.
Yeah, I think the only thing I will say is that we did spot him. But
So we can,
yeah.
sounds good. His next court date, guys, we're waiting to find that out. It sounds like they're postponing it left and right. So that is on his docket. Right now it sounds that he has a private attorney. Well, he does have a private attorney, and they're discussing a potential plea. Next court date again is, yep. And that's investigative. Cool. So, I mean, a lot of investigative questions. That's why I'm, I'm trying to like weed away from.
Probing a little bit?
Yeah. Let's check for.
Nick, maybe I can ask you a question.
You can ask me as many questions.
So
oh boy, I don't know if I like this. I'm kidding.
What was at any point in the manhunt itself and your coverage, did you feel unsafe?
No, my God, no. I had a blast. I wish he would pop out. We were ready. We had tripods. We would have whacked him in the head, or at least tried to get a snippet. You have anything to say? Hong was practicing different languages because he didn't know at first if it was Portuguese, if it was Spanish. He was trying all these little, and yeah, no, we were never scared. Kind of hoping he would come out, but well, let me back up until he got the gun. When he got the gun, that's when that changed it all. But before the gun, never, because he wasn't looking for us. I mean, he more so you. He probably would have tried, but
Yeah.
I have a camera. I don't think. not a threat, I don't think. According to the state police, he wasn't out to hurt us, so I felt kind of safe with that.
Yeah, there was a lot of intel to back that up. Like, there were certain instances where probably had an opportunity to harm someone, but didn't. And that came into play time and time again. So, like, as the manhunt went on, I felt more safe as kind of days went on and nothing occurred. The most sensitive things that happened were just the burglaries.
Are we still 100% sure he didn't team up with another... Are we still 100% sure that he didn't team up with another small person in a trench coat? I feel like that was never fully answered. That comes from Dave Pierce on YouTube.
I don't even know how to answer that question.
Did you know what he's talking about?
He would have been at least 10 feet tall.
Did you see the press conference? Okay.
Yeah.
Next question is from the 𝗣𝗘𝗥𝗑𝗧𝗘𝗥 Rising. Considering that there was a reward offered, did the drone operator and or drone company employees receive any of the rewards since they assisted in the capture?
No, there's no incentives for us. It's essentially our contract. That's it.
Perfect. Let's see. Is his sister still in the country? I'll answer that. Yes, she is in the country, and she's staying in the country. Let's see.
This is beautiful out here. When the sun just peeks through the trees.
How many hours can you look at terrain before... That's a good question, actually. How many
Before I go
hours
insane.
before you need to rest your eyes? And this is from Twitter, from DJR2980.
Yeah, so... realistically, like, blue light plays a big factor into how much we can actually work. But it's up to our discretion however much we need before we need to rest our eyes. I make myself and my team always wear blue light glasses. But the really cool part about thermal imaging itself is that it's black and white. You're not looking at any crazy colors. You're looking at black and white. One of the big things that can affect you after a certain amount of hours of looking at it is you can start to see little black speckles everywhere. But a lot of what we identified as being like the most effective way to do this is we have one person that's on controls, which basically controls where the drone goes, and then we have another person on the camera itself who is actually watching. The person that's actually watching is the person who needs to rest their eyes the most, because they can start seeing things, they can start having visualizations that don't exist and things like that.
People that are asking about the fundraiser, I just realized, so YouTube, as always, has demonetized the account again, saying that it's not original. So instead of laying it to waste, we're asking that if you were to donate it to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. You can do so on YouTube. If you click on the video, there's a tab up top. It's from YouTube itself, and it links directly to CHOP. So if you were going to support, and you can't, if you're not on another social media network, go ahead and give to CHOP. It's on YouTube. Can the thermal drones see in cement tunnels? That's from Tina Gillo.
Heck no.
No.
Heck no.
Let's see. This one is from Susan Hallbrook. How well does your high-tech thermal equipment work in bad weather conditions?
So the equipment itself is really effective. The more concerning part is the actual aircraft itself. We could use thermal imaging in a full downpour, heavy downpour where like it's basically raining so hard that you can't see. The aircraft is the big concern there.
From Stephanie on YouTube, how many hours a day did you work, and did you have any days off, and did somebody cover for you when you have days off?
I will say I worked 13 days. I had a couple hours off here and there, which is when I went out of town. Needed a little bit of a break, and ended up having to rush back here pretty quickly.
Yeah, it wasn't really,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get around the investigative stuff, and...
Oh, and then to add to that question as well, When I was out of town, we were actually grounded at that point.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember that they did ground a lot of, I mean, almost everybody. It was literally marshals were pulled out, sheriff's departments from surrounding counties were pulled out, local police were really never pulled in, but kind of pulled out the little that were in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, they definitely, I think it was on the 8th or the 7th when they had them cornered, and then...
And just to reiterate, I mean, when they say pulled out, it was just additional resources. So, like, the perimeter completely stayed shut.
Okay.
The additional resources, which is like 𝗲𝗘𝗥 officers, CERT officers, all those guys, they were pulled out for rest or whatever.
Okay, and then they come back.
Right.
So that's why we would see CERT showing up at 3 a.m. out of nowhere. They're not just stationed all waiting. They would be at home. Okay.
They need to. We have to understand too. Like they're people. They operate on, most of them are law enforcement officers, and they operate on 12-hour shifts, and then they get a few days off, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just work them for 24 hours a day. And I think effectively it was very well planned out to have a certain amount of officers here, change shift, to where every officer at least got a few hours of sleep.
Yeah. I mean, you need it, and I know a lot of them, and they were exhausted, but they didn't want to go home because they wanted to catch this guy. It wasn't about the hours that they put in; they weren't on the clock for a lot of those hours.
You saw the picture of when they actually apprehended him, and
it was
some of them were smiling.
Well, everybody
in the picture.
It was a celebration. The nightmare is over, and now the town, the county, and the police, everybody can go back to bed.
Yeah.
The next question over here is it true that he was sleeping in the trees during the day? I know that was a huge thing for a second.
In the trees?
So there were a lot of random. I don't
know if you guys are familiar with the Pennsylvania landscape, but there's no dodo birds here. And there's no big nest that he can sleep in. No, as to my knowledge, there was no sleeping in the trees.
You didn't find a sleeping bag up in there?
Could you sleep up there?
I couldn't get up there. No, let's see. Any other non-investigative questions? We're going to check on Facebook too real quick, guys, and YouTube and X. But other than that, we pretty much, I think, covered the most that we can cover until the day comes when the trial comes to an end, when when it's over, and more stuff opens up. I know a lot of stuff is off limits now, not just from you, but from filings that I have. I file for information all the time, and it's an ongoing investigation. So if we have any more questions that are not investigative, we'll take them. Otherwise, I mean, I think we save a lot. We can't say much, guys. That's the thing. So a lot of the stuff that we, you just can't talk about. I mean, I can't, he won't answer. I'll ask him right now. Let's see. Let me ask him an investigative question just to see if he'll answer it. It's worth a shot. I've always been told to ask. Hold on.
Doesn't hurt to ask, right?
Yeah, let's see. Oh, now I'm lagging.
I keep hearing these dogs in the woods. That's also giving me a little bit of...
Yeah, some of these are very investigative.
By the way, were you on the perimeter when they were kind of doing the sweep through?
Yeah.
And there was some of the canines were barking and making a lot of noise. You remember that part?
Yeah.
Remember that time?
In was it Glenmore? No, yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Because it was awfully quiet. So in Glenmore, it was quiet, much more quiet than it was here, and it was quiet here. But over there, a pin falls, and you can hear it.
Yeah. So another concerning thing that the SWAT teams ran into, that 𝗲𝗘𝗥 ran into, that CERT ran into, was how many. You see how thick the brush is. How many animals and how many different species there are out in the woods. Some of the dogs would, whether they were local police dogs, whether they were, whether it was Yoda, but whoever it was, were actually picking up on these animal scents, and I guess it's none of the animals they've ever come in contact with before, and so some of the dogs would actually smell and freak out over these new animals. which is very interesting.
Did Danelo actually make it into the Brandywine River?
You cannot answer that question.
Okay. What is the most unsafe you felt during this whole manhunt?
I think I answered a little bit earlier. So I think the most unsafe for me was just driving into the perimeter after he had acquired a firearm. I'm not thinking that he would. Well, this is, I guess, the first night after he acquired the firearm, or the night of, and we were kind of a little bit of an unknown at that point. Driving into the perimeter, and now I'm by myself. I'm trying to get to our point. We're checking my car, but after you get past that perimeter, it is darkness. There's nothing. Nobody had their lights on. Nobody had porch lights on. It was just darkness.
People want to know what you do other than chase 𝗬𝗑𝗓 across Chester County. What do you do?
Yeah, so I own a digital marketing agency out of Philadelphia on Walnut Street, actually. So we work with brands like Celsius and UFC and NASCAR and stuff like that.
That's an exciting. I mean, that's a
double
like life almost.
It's kind of like a 180 for me, right? Sometimes I'm a marketer, and sometimes I'm chasing fugitives.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think we left anything out that we can't get into. That you can think off the top of your head? We touched base on essentially your day one, your last day, and the in-between, and the little break you had, which was, a few hours. So is there anything that you want to add that I might have, or if you have any questions?
No, I think we kind of
hit everything. I'm kind of out of questions, and I'm never out of questions, but
I left them speechless, guys.
Yeah, because there are a lot of stuff we can't say, and that's the thing. But it's when he's found guilty or when he's convicted, more will come out, and then I'm sure we'll be able to circle back.
Yeah.
I'm going to check one more time just to make sure that we don't have any more questions, and then we're going to probably call it. Okay, now questions are starting quickly, of course. Somebody says, can you go over the last day again because your audio called out during that part?
You guys hear me now? Does that work now? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
You can hear me? Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, because there's some comments.
So for our last day, there was a lot of movement, right? We kind of had we had issues with terrain, a lot bigger issues than we've ever had. We kind of ran into obstacles along Lundale Farm, along the perimeter there, to where he was able to move pretty easily, and we weren't able to do much of anything. There was a lot of intel being swirled around, and the authorities were very confident that they had a really good idea on where he was. And we basically held up in the air as long as we could. We were sweeping. When we didn't find anything, we got pulled out of the air. We went back up about 2 hours later. We were just kind of holding a position, got a little bit of a heat map on something we identified. Could be a deer, could be him. That's when we held position. We were basically kept out until it started raining. When it started raining, we held our position as much as we could. There was a good bit of surrounding done by the MORTAC and CERT teams themselves and the marshals, and they basically waited for the rain to hold off. I don't know how much I can go into here.
Yeah, let's not go too much into it.
Yeah.
So not from this case, but have you ever been on a drone case where you experienced trauma?
Trauma as far as what?
I mean,
is there...
You can go through the questions too, because you might know what you can answer better than I.
It's tough to talk about that because I don't know. There's a lot of missing person cases. There's a lot of cases where There's people that have escaped, but they're not convicted killers. I can say pretty effectively that I've never experienced trauma being on one of these cases. I've been very fortunate to have worked that closely with law enforcement and never have experienced any type of trauma beyond, obviously, drone case-wise, fires are a completely different thing, which is where I got my start.
And there was one more that I saw that was very interesting. How long have you been doing this?
So since I was about 15 years old, 14 years old, ever since drones really came into effect, I was flying them, figuring out what I could do with them. Could I add a fishing lure on it and go fishing in the ocean? So since I was pretty young.
And I think that's really everything that we have for this. And there'll be more to come, but I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank you for coming.
Yeah, of course.
I know we can't discuss much, but it was amazing to have the community hear from somebody that worked it and just get a fresh face, a fresh voice, and hear something from the inside, you know, and it was definitely fun having you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, hopefully I was able to share enough where, you know, everyone kind of wants to hear a little bit, but after things kind of fall into line and the judicial system does what it does best, we'll kind of have some more talking points.
Sounds good. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Cam, for coming.
Of course.
And
thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Thank you.
Of course.